Hi, my name is Sunny Fleming Wyatt. I am a proud IVF mom of 2 kids. I live in Charlotte, North Carolina. I am married and I work in the agile tech field. I would define myself as a free spirit, as well as somebody who is probably a type A personality, which is probably an oxymoron, but that's probably the best description of myself. I love to travel. I love trying new different types of foods, but I'm also very rigid as far as order and time. So it's kind of like I'm an oxymoron, I guess you could say, in a way, but that's just who I am. So I was raised in Raleigh, North Carolina. I am the youngest of 3. My sisters and I have a huge age difference. My oldest sister is 14 years older than I am. And the next person in line, she's 11 years older than me. So essentially they raised me in conjunction with my parents. And so by the time I was of age, I was essentially raised as an only child because they had gone on to college and grad school, and they would come home for Christmas, but the way we were raised was completely different because they had each other, and I really didn't have anyone other than our dog and then my parents occasionally. My parents are older, they had me at 35 and 37 versus they had my sisters at 22 and 24. And so they were able to do more activities with them. I feel like at one point I ended up almost, I don't want to say raising my parents, but by the time I moved out, they were in their 60s or late 60s. So, they had other health concerns that my sisters maybe weren't aware of. I remember going on a trip with them. And I had to get the luggage off of the airplane, and my sisters just walked off the airplane. And I think because they had seen them in their 20s and 30s, they kind of pictured them still in their 20s and 30s, but I knew them in their 40s and 50s. And, at that point they had back ailments, they had, knee replacements. So it was kind of a different experience. But the other issue, or the other thing they would probably say, is that I was afforded more opportunities because they had me later in life. Which I think kind of defined kind of how I was raised. I didn't really have to want for anything because they only were paying for one child versus the 2. So my sisters may have had hot dogs and bologna sandwiches growing up versus me. I was eating salmon and, chicken. And I think that really did define me in a way. And my husband probably would laugh and say, she basically had a silver spoon growing up, whereas my husband, on the other hand, his mom was a single mom. And I think that really has defined our relationship because he's had to work super hard for everything that he has. Nothing was given to him versus me, me asking my parents for field trip money or wanting to go to overnight camp. There was really no financial burden because they were, 1, only paying for 1 child, and 2, they were extremely established in their careers at that point. So I just think that just made me, the way I was raised, different than maybe a lot of other individuals like myself. So the impact of basically being raised by my entire family in my adult life, 1, I don't think I really had a childhood. The funny part is I have a 2-year-old son now, and we're watching DuckTales together. I've never seen any of these shows. My husband is talking about, Tom and Jerry. I didn't watch any of that growing up. I watched Daniel Steele movies on Lifetime because there were 18-year-olds in the house or 22-year-olds in the house, and we only had 1 or 2 TVs. This is not like the 2000s, So whatever was on the TV was what everyone watched. So I didn't get to experience some of the cartoons. Personally, I don't really care for cartoons now. I'm more into dramas, and my favorite docuseries growing up was 2020, as a 6-year-old. And so it's because I was raised by adults. And it also has kind of impacted my sister relationship because, like I said, I have 2 sisters. They are best of friends, and we are really good friends. I'm not saying we're not good friends, but it took more into my 20s for that relationship to develop, because they were almost like a mother figure. They would pick me up from school. They had the right to punish me. It wasn't, I almost had 3 moms instead of just the 1. And then when I got in my 20s and 30s, they had to kind of change and shift the dynamic. And we have kids that are around the same age now, and it's just so nice to be able to kind of have that bond with them that they've shared since the 70s. And I was born in 86, so that's just kind of a different shift. I don't think I would want them to prepare or myself or the way I was raised any differently than I was. I was extremely blessed. You know, I was afforded various opportunities to travel really young, and I think that shaped and molded me as a person. I do think I was kind of shielded in a way from reality. A great example of that is when I went to college, I had 32 towels and bath cloths in a suitcase because I wanted one for the morning bath and one in the shower for the afternoon bath. And I knew I was going to go home like every 2 weeks, so that would give me a stretch for the entire 2 weeks instead of having to reuse the same bath cloth and towel. And my roommate only brought 2 towels and 2 bath cloths with her, and I felt so bad. They ended up giving her my 2 extra because I had 32 and there was more days than there were in the month. And she was astonished at how much luggage I brought to campus. And I don't think I realized not everyone was afforded the same opportunities until I was mixed in with individuals from various different socioeconomic backgrounds, and just hearing some of the stories from those individuals on how they had to work multiple jobs to pay to go to school, and I didn't have to do that. I don't think I really respected how much my parents actually did for me until I was intertwined with other individuals that weren't given that opportunity. And I think it's because they had me later in life that they were afforded those opportunities. Now, I will say, my husband and I can afford those same opportunities for our son, and he is adamant on not raising our children in the same capacity that I was raised because he was not raised that way. He wants a great mix between how he was raised and how I was raised because he feels as though it's important for children to work for things. Like his first car, he worked at UPS and he worked at Food Lion in order to like afford like this $1,800 car that he couldn't even really drive because it was a stick shift. He didn't know how to drive a stick shift. What is the only thing he could afford? So he taught himself how to drive a stick shift. Versus me, my first car, you know, I bought off the lot. It was brand new. It had 5 miles on it. My parents put it in my name, but they paid it just to establish my credit. And so he's saying that because I was afforded all those opportunities, I don't work as hard as him, which I don't think is necessarily true in a way, but he doesn't want our children to be spoiled even though we can afford to do those things. So we kind of have to meet in the middle. And at Christmas time, like we only get my son 3 gifts. One is from myself, and one is from my husband, and one is from what we would call Santa, I guess you could say. And we don't exceed that. Because although we can afford multiple gifts, we don't want him to think that, you know, money grows on trees, that you're not gonna have to work for it. So we are very conscious on not spoiling him and trying to give him experiences. Now he has traveled, so he has gone, you know, outside of the country because that's important to us. And we would rather give our money or put our money to him learning about the world than actually giving him like items that, you know, he plays with a toy today, tomorrow is no longer of an interest. He may not remember half of those trips, but we have pictures of them, and the memories are for myself and my husband, more than they are for him. And we're hoping that he finds a love into travel. And, you know, at some point we can kind of stop giving gifts and we can take bigger trips with him just to experience, you know, the things that you read about in textbooks. So although I was raised, I guess you could say spoiled, and my husband wants to change kind of the way we raise our son, I do agree with it in some capacities. Right now we're having this fight about this car that I want to buy my son. My husband doesn't think he needs it. You know, he's getting a new sibling in 7 weeks and he's really into cars and we can afford it. So I'm like, why can't we just buy it? And I'm probably honestly just going to buy the car. It's probably going to cause an argument, but I feel like there is a balance, and he's 2. Like, I don't think he needs all of the life lessons at 2. You know, you can teach them at 5, 7, 15, and I think we'll get there, but I don't think it's fair for me to stop the purchase of me buying this car, especially when he's going to have to start sharing things, and he's never shared anything in the next few weeks. So like I said, it's probably going to cause a huge argument. I personally don't care. I'm the type of person that does what she wants to do, and, you know, I'll just deal with the consequences later. So again, I do agree with, limiting things. I also want him to be a kid. And because we can afford it, I don't see what the issue is. And so it's kind of a continuous battle in our house. So hopefully we'll get there and find a balance. I hope. But, it is what it is. So womanhood defined for me in the very beginning of my life, women basically rule everything. My mom is a very strong woman. She's been married to my dad for 50 years in June. I always asked her what the secret was to such a long-standing relationship, and she says she does what she wants to do. And I've taken that motto on in my own relationship, and my sisters also have done the same thing. They've also pinpointed how important education is. My mom was a school teacher for like 35 years. She has a master's degree. She was the first person in her family to graduate college, actually go to grad school as well. And she did all of that while being a mom of 2 kids. So I personally feel as though, she instilled education to make sure that you didn't really need a man to support you. And she did that and told that to everyone, my sisters included. And so for us, both my sisters are attorneys. They moved out when they were, in their early 20s and, established their own careers. They have their own families. I was a little different. I moved out at 27, just because I loved being in my parents' house. I loved being around them. I still went to college, I still went to grad school, and I still took the whole education piece, and, I went and built a career for myself. I think because I do make enough money to support myself without my husband, it kind of gives me the same mindset as my mom. If this marriage didn't work tomorrow, I would be fine. And that probably sounds horrible, but I think that's also one of the key points of my relationship with my husband is that I need him for emotional support, but I don't need him for financial support. And I always liked the independence that my mom had away from my dad because of that. So the point that I thought I was a grown woman and then realized I was a grown woman probably be after I had my son. And the reason why I say that is because I've always wanted to be a mom, and I struggled to actually get to motherhood. As I mentioned earlier, I had to go through IVF, and it's a whole process that unless you've experienced it, it's hard to even kind of explain just the emotional roller coaster, the cost. You pay all of this money and you don't even know if it's going to work. And then every ultrasound, every appointment you go to, you're just expecting bad news because it's been so hard to get here. And then I had my son in the middle of a pandemic. So my son's birthday is April 9th. The city of Charlotte shut down March 17th. When they shut down March 17th, you could bring, 3 individuals in the hospital with you. And I remember every week I would go to the doctor's office to get checked, and I'm like, can we induce? I knew he was going to be a bigger baby, and I wanted my mom to be there because you always expect your mother to be at the birth of your child. And every week, one restriction was being applied to the hospital. And I remember when it got to the week I had my son, only my husband could be there. And I was the first person in the family that literally had their child without my mom present. She had to FaceTime me, and my delivery did not go the way that I expected it to go. I got to the hospital at 4 o'clock in the morning. My water broke at 1:30. I tried to labor at home. I sat in the bathtub and the contractions were just horrible. And I delivered probably about 20 minutes from our house. And so my husband drove me to the hospital. And, you have this expectation of how your labor is going to go. It didn't go any way that I thought it was going to go. And I remember thinking to myself, I'm going to have to do this by myself. I have no one here. My husband was there. He was great. He was a great support system, but he's never had a baby before. And I remember thinking, like, how are they going to let me do this? I get to the hospital, I get the epidural around 6 o'clock in the morning. They put me on Pitocin at 9. At 4 o'clock in the afternoon, they come back and check my cervix. I had only dilated maybe 4 centimeters. They upped the Pitocin. At 7 o'clock, they came in and said, hey, you're at 5 centimeters. Great. There was a shift change. And I started going backwards. I was now at 4 centimeters dilated because I had been in labor for so long and the baby had not progressed at all. And I was told I'd have to go through a C-section. And in your mind, you're thinking you've done all of this and you're going to get cut open. And your mom is still not here. And so they wheeled me into the OR. And I remember them cutting me open and my head started to shake from side to side. I don't know if I was having an allergic reaction to the drugs they had given me, but I was like, something is wrong. And I had like unable to actually speak it because there was so much going on. The baby arrived, he was perfect, but I kept saying something is wrong with me. They wheeled me back to my room, and in about 20 minutes, the nurses came in and said my uterus was boggy and that I was, hemorrhaging essentially. And my husband is doing skin to skin with our son. I didn't get to experience skin to skin with our son for the first 2 hours of his life. He had to bottle feed him through Similac when I had this birth plan that I was going to breastfeed him after birth, because I literally was laying on the table, essentially dying from having my son. 5 nurses came in to push down on my stomach to try to get the clots to be removed. And I remember thinking, I am going to die without actually touching my son. And my mom is not here to even help me through this. And I remember Kevin had no idea any of this was going on. They didn't even tell him till the next day that I almost died. And I remember thinking, like, I am now responsible for this child's life. And I don't even know if I'm gonna make it. And, they were able to get the hemorrhaging to stop. And, everything was fine at that point. But it's just a different experience to give birth by yourself when you had this expectation that your mother was going to be there. And that's when I was like, oh, I feel like a real woman now. Like, I feel like a real mom, because I had to step up because my mother was no longer going to be there to help me and support me in that effort. And I think only people who have delivered in the pandemic understand that, because we had this whole expectation and it just went out the door in 3 weeks. My niece is 5 weeks older than my son. The whole family was there. She was born on March the 2nd. The entire family was able to come. Kai was born April 9th. No one was able to come. And my dad has constantly said, he's the only grandchild I didn't get to meet at the hospital. And so now I'm hoping with the birth of my daughter in a few weeks that, metrics will stay low and the hospital will still allow 3 guests so my mom can be there, because I would like to experience that, because I didn't get to experience the first go round. So after this experience that I had, Kevin and I have always talked about having more kids. So, we actually did a second round of IVF over the summer, because I was born with a genetic condition. And essentially, I have been told that if I try to have children without IVF, my rate of miscarriage is like 60%. And it's very high for late-term miscarriage. And so we could go down the path of trying on our own, or we could use IVF to basically test our embryos to make sure that they are genetically balanced. So my first round of IVF, I got 2 embryos. I got a girl and a boy. And Kevin and I have always talked about having 3 kids. And the quality of our other embryos that we did not genetically test were not of enough standard or good enough standard that you'd want to pay the $5,000 it costs to genetically test them. So because with my job, they do pay for IVF, they are a great employer with that. We decided to do a second round this summer to see how many additional embryos we could get to see if we could have 3 kids. So then after that, we had 2 more embryos that we did, that we got back, another girl and a boy. So in total, we have 4 embryos. And it was just always a conversation that we've always had, that we've always wanted 3 children. I will say that this pregnancy has been significantly different than my son's pregnancy. My son's pregnancy went off without a hitch the entire time until delivery. This pregnancy has been very rough for me. I have experienced morning sickness. I have broken out in hives. I caught COVID at one point. I've just been nauseous the entire time. Like the morning sickness has not gone away. I'm 32 weeks today actually, and I still am experiencing some morning sickness some days of the week. The heartburn is horrible with this pregnancy. So I don't know if we're going to have a third child. That's, I guess, where I'm getting at. This may be it for me, just because this has been a different experience than our son. When I had agreed to the third kid, it was because I went off without any problems. I worked out till I was 37 weeks pregnant with him. I only stopped because the governor shut the gyms down. This pregnancy, I've been to the gym 3 times. I actually just gave my cancellation notice last week and said, girl, I'm gonna have to see you at the end of this year. I just can't do it. And it's because my back is hurting. It's just a completely different experience. So I'm hoping when she comes to the world that, you know, because I've struggled this entire time, it'll be a breeze when she gets here. Because my son, he's a great baby. You know, he's a great son. I love him, but he's very high energy. So we're like, oh, hopefully this baby is calm, because my son is all boy, as they like to describe, and I love it. I love the energy. I just don't know if I can do 2 with that much energy. So with my husband doing skin to skin and unable to like see my son, for the first 2 or 3 hours, I don't think it impacted our relationship or my connection with him, because I immediately was in awe, like, oh, this baby, he's mine. My biggest fear was something else is going to go wrong tomorrow. I don't want to get so attached and then this be it for me. So I don't think it was until I actually was released to the hospital that I felt a little better. Then the concern was, who do I let over my house? Because I don't want my son to catch COVID, because you didn't really know at the time, what impacts it had on children. Because at the time, we were like maybe 30 days into COVID. So I remember I have a picture of my dad holding my son. My son was born on a Thursday, and my dad came up the following Saturday, and he has a mask all the way up to his eyes. He has like a face shield on, gloves on. That's how he met my son, versus 5 weeks ago, he had met my niece completely uncovered. So it's just kind of crazy to see the dynamic or the shift. And my husband's mother, she didn't meet my son until he was almost 6 months old, and she lives in Raleigh. And the reason why is because she is a lung cancer survivor, and she's a breast cancer survivor. And she was afraid that she would catch COVID from one of us because we had to go to the grocery store. And I felt so bad for her. She met my son in a parking lot of the mall in Raleigh, standing across from the stroller. That's how she met him. And he was almost 6 months old. And I felt my heart broke for her, because she only has my husband. That's her only child. So my son was her first grandchild. So I'm hoping now that, she's been vaccinated, and, we've been in this pandemic going on now 2.5 years. She will be able to meet her granddaughter immediately after birth, because I know that was something she really struggled with, was that everyone else had met him, except her. And she was so excited to have a grandchild. She threw us this baby shower, and she just kept talking about it. And the funny thing is, the day she threw the baby shower was the first COVID positive case in North Carolina. It was February 29th. I will never forget it, because it was the day of the shower, and we were talking about it at the shower, and we were talking about it so casually, like, oh, there's one person that flew into RDU airport with COVID, and she works at the airport. And she was like, oh, it's not a big deal. No one had a mask on. And literally in 3 weeks, the city shut down. So it was just kind of crazy on how things shifted. And I will always feel bad that she didn't get to meet my son until he was almost crawling. And she lives so close. She lives in Raleigh, and we live in Charlotte, which is only 2-hour difference. So my relationship with my mother-in-law is like Mount Everest. It is very rocky. We do not have a great relationship. I would like for it to be better. I have made a lot of attempts to make it better. It has not progressed in what I would consider better. I'm not sure her relationship with her son is even that good either. He is her only child. And I think she's done a lot for him to get to where he is. My husband is originally from New York City. They are from Queens, New York. And she worked multiple jobs to send him to private school in a different borough, because she didn't want him to go to the neighborhood school. So she was working from sun up to sundown. So I will always respect her for, I guess you could say, the hustle she did to even get him to where he is. My husband was, born in what you would consider New York City projects. They did not have a lot, but they made the most of what they had. And she moved him down to North Carolina at 15 years old to give him a better life. And the whole purpose was him to go to school, to go to college. So he did go to A&T with me. And I think the shift of her moving, she had a city job. I'm not sure if you're familiar with how New York jobs work, but you can get a city job there and you can make significant amount of money without having to go to college. That doesn't really play very well in the South. So I think she struggled financially and to move him here. She took a significant pay decrease because she didn't have the education to be able to command the same salary that she was making up there. And I'm not sure if she resented him for it in a way, but there was a lot of tension once he got to high school and then him going to college. She was always been very proud of him. He went to college, he went to grad school, got a CPA, got a corporate job. But I always felt as though he was parenting her in a way. And what I mean by that is she didn't make the best decisions financially and her credit wasn't the best. And I think that's learned behavior. And if you don't have an example of that, you essentially do what you think is correct. And in some ways that can basically spite you in the back. She's done some instances in a way that I'm like, as a mother, I would never do that, but I can't speak on her history because I don't have that. When I came into the picture, my husband was 27 at the time. I was 24 at the time. I don't think she really cared for me much. And I think it's because she feels I was raised, quote unquote, spoiled, and she had to work for everything that she has. She's gone into our house, not speaking to me in some instances. She'll talk through him to say something on my behalf. It's just been one rude thing after another. We've done couple counseling before we got married, and a lot of the conversation was centered around his mother and my relationship and the dynamic. And I kind of backed off and said, I'm not gonna try anymore because it's really not making a difference. It's just making me go crazy in a way. And then right before we got married, him and her had this conversation, and he said, this is gonna be my wife. I'm going to have to, she's gonna depend on me, and you're gonna have to respect that decision. And they didn't talk for like 6 months. And I remember my wedding, I had a dress code where everybody at our wedding had to wear black. And I didn't even know if she was coming to our wedding. She showed up at the rehearsal dinner with like this beautiful black dress I had never even seen before. And she was like, oh, which dress should I wear? And I didn't even know who this person was because I hadn't spoken to her in 6 months. And to see her like try to be friendly and like help me get in my wedding dress, it was a completely different dynamic. The next day, she went back to who she was before. We went a few years without speaking. Then I got pregnant. And I remember him telling her that, we had to do IVF. And one of the things she said was, why don't you just try the natural way? And I remember thinking, do you think we want to pay $20,000 and take all of these battery of shots if the natural way worked? I would have tried that a while ago. Do you not think we haven't tried that? And at the time, she was going through radiation for cancer. And I don't know if she wasn't in a great mental space. But after I got pregnant with Kai, she started to come back around more and she was very interested. And this recently, we took a trip to Jamaica, and there was an incident that happened with her dog, and she's a huge dog mom. And I don't know if she resented me for going on the trip. I don't really know, but I haven't spoken to her. This is where I'm getting at. I haven't spoken to her in, would it be 2 months at this point? I did invite her to Kai's birthday party. She has not responded to my text message. This was 6 weeks ago. I don't know about the dynamic. We'll see if she shows up to the birth of my daughter. I'm thinking she will, but I don't think it's going to change the shift in our relationship because I think their relationship is also severed. And I think that there's additional counseling that's going to be required there that's outside of me. And I'm just hoping that, at some point she does come back. I think in a way she feels like she lost her son instead of gaining a daughter. And that's the piece that I can't really understand or comprehend because I come from such a close-knit family. My family does everything together. Christmas, Thanksgiving, graduations. My nephew has a play tomorrow at the elementary school. I'm still gonna go. I'm gonna pencil it in on my calendar. It's just a different dynamic, and I don't understand it. And I don't know if it's 'cause she's from New York City and I'm from the South. I don't know if it's a economic difference. I really don't know where the shift is. I don't know if it's going to be repaired because we're going on 11 years in August. And if it hasn't been fixed now, I just don't foresee it changing, quite honestly. But becoming a mother has changed me immensely. I was the type of person who slept till, noon. I did things on my own time. My son is very demanding as far as his schedules are concerned. He gets up at 8, he goes to bed at 8, but between 8 and 8, he is, all over the place. And I didn't realize how high energy children were until I had my own child. And, the days of sleeping to noon, they don't exist anymore. I'd be lucky to stay in bed to 7:30. Which is doing significantly better than a lot of people who have children. I hear some people wake up at 5 a.m., 6 a.m. I don't think you're mentally prepared for the exhaustion or the sleep exhaustion until you actually have a child, especially if you try to nurse. That's just a completely different experience, I'll say, because even when the baby's sleeping through the night, you don't sleep through the night because you still have to, make milk, you still have to regulate milk. And with this formula shortage that's going on right now, I'm extremely concerned about that as well. I was blessed with my son to make, a significant amount of milk with him, but that doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to do that again with this baby. So it's on me. The onus is on me to make sure that I get up every 3 hours. And it's 3 hours from the start of pump. It's not 3 hours from finish. So if it takes you 45 minutes to empty, you now really only have like 2 hours and 15 minutes before you're up pumping again. And then that's if you have to wash pump parts, if you have to wash bottles. I mean, that could take 15 minutes. So now you only have 2 hours. If he wakes up or she wakes up and you have to change their diaper, you can be down to, hour 45 minutes. Whereas my husband, he was sleeping through the night, by week 8, I did not have that luxury. So I think it's changed me to know that my time is no longer my time. My time belongs to him. But it is amazing to see their personalities develop, to see them, flourish in like my son, just see him talking now. We've been through speech therapy for the last 6 months. And to see him, showing me what a banana is or a toy, just to see him develop from a baby to like an actual toddler is amazing. And I will forever be thankful and grateful that the Lord gave me this opportunity because of how hard it was to get here. So I just think you change and evolve as a woman by being a mom. And I know not everyone wants that experience, and I commend those that don't because it's, it is very demanding. But to be able to experience that after the struggles that we've gone through, it's rewarding, I'll say. So if I were to tell my childhood self about the adult version of myself, I would just say, take a breath. It's all going to work out. I struggled in school growing up because I actually am dyslexic, and it's kind of interesting dynamic to come from a family of complete educators. Like my dad had PhD from Duke University by the time he was 24. So no one in their family ever struggled education-wise but me. I got to the third kid and it was like I wasn't reading at grade level by 5th grade. Everything was just, I worked much harder than other kids to even be able to get a C. A C to me was equivalent to an A because I was working multiple hours to even get that C. And, I had a teacher tell me in 8th grade, I had signed up for honors English for 9th grade. And she was like, you're not even going to graduate high school. And I don't know why you're taking this honors class because you're not going to be able to get through it. And it was a struggle, but it was a challenge that I was willing to take on because I don't like anyone to tell me no. After high school, I went to college. After college, I went to graduate school. After graduate school, I went and got a corporate job, and I picked a field that a lot of African-American women are not even in. I picked tech. I picked Scrum. I picked like Teradata and SQL, like dashboard design, analytics. We are not captured in that field at all. I took it on because were not captured. It's almost like someone had told me, no, you do not belong here. And I wanted to put myself there because I wanted them to show that with hard work and even dedication, you can get there. I do not come from a technical background at all. I went to YouTube University to get to where I am. And I worked, I was up at night reading books, trying to learn this code SQL language that, I didn't learn in school, but I saw that's where the money was. And I saw that that's where the path and career was. And so I would like to tell myself, younger self, it's okay. It's okay you're not reading at grade level. It's okay that, you're struggling in math. It's all gonna work out in the end. You just have to continue to work hard. And I think that's the key point. Not everyone comes in here as Albert Einstein, and no one's expecting you to be that way. But if you're willing to put in the work, you can get the reward at the end. And I think that's the most important thing that I would love to tell my younger self. It's okay. Those tears you're crying because you're, being picked on in school because you said a word incorrectly, or you inferred a number and someone was picking on you. It's okay. Like, when you get 30, it's all gonna work out. And I think that's the emphasis I would like to tell my younger self. At the end of the day, I want my dash to say that I live my life to the fullest. I am a big believer in travel. I am a big believer in just experiences in life. I don't want anything to hold me back, even if it's something that I am not able to do today. I want to conquer it for tomorrow. So I want my future self down the road and my ancestors, my kids and my grandkids to say she lived her life to the fullest is what I would want my dash to say.